Welcome to Total Retail Talks, your podcast channel for retail knowledge.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Total Retail Talks. I'm Joe Keenan, the editor-in-chief of Total Retail, and I'm pleased to be joined on today's episode by Ann Mezzenga as well as Chris Walton. They are the co-CEOs of Omni Talk Retail. We're excited. Actually, we're going to be working with Ann at our Total Retail Tech event. She's going to be moderating a session, and we're going to talk a little bit about Omni Talk Retail as well as some of the greater industry trends that we're seeing and we've seen so far this year, as well as kind of look at the rest of 2024 and specifically maybe a little bit about Q4. So thank you, Ann and Chris, for joining me on today's episode.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Joe.
So I'm going to get us started by having you tell us a little bit about the origin of Omni Talk Retail. Tell us a little bit. I mentioned co-CEOs. Tell us kind of how the business got started and what was your inspiration for founding the company.
Yeah, well, Chris and I met back in 2014 when we started working together at Target on their Store of the Future concept. So Chris and I came together, and Target really had asked us, how do you conceive of a Target store? What's going to get people to walk through the doors in the next 5 to 10 years? And so we spent several years at Target kind of building the team to support that effort. And during that time we were doing so, we really felt like there was kind of a nascent space where, people were evaluating retail trends and technology from the perspective of retailers who could actually, roll it out, who had to put this into practice at scale. And so when we were done with our project at Target, Chris started writing a blog called Omni Talk, where he was taking his very important degree, writing in history and economics degrees, and putting them into comparisons of what was happening in the retail industry at the time. And was it, Chris? It was the Vietnam War, right? The Battle of Tiananmen.
Yeah, the first article compared Amazon to the Vietnam War. Yes.
Yes.
Natural correlation between the
natural
two.
Correlations, Joe. Yes, 100%.
Let me also preface this by saying, Chris and I are the yin to each other's yang. I would never have done that. I have no idea. I can't even pronounce it. So no, we kind of started getting engagement after Chris started writing that article, turned the articles into a podcast format, and the rest is kind of history. Now we focus Omni Talk Retail on going out to really research the people, the technologies and the companies that are shaping the future of the retail industry.
So actually, I kind of want to follow up just a little bit because I think it adds some nice context for the audience. And you mentioned you two of you met it when you were both at Target working on the Store of the Future there. Maybe just tell us a little, because obviously a very specific industry. Tell us a little bit about your career backgrounds before you started Omni Talk Retail, because I think that'll kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, well, my background was in broadcast news first and foremost. And then I worked in retail kind of on the side because that job does not pay the bills. And then I moved into from news into advertising and creative. I worked at NBC Universal in New York, and then moved my way back to Minneapolis to work in the ad industry, made my way into Target. And so my background was really on conceptual design. How does it feel, look? How do you kind of design the store to accommodate guests in a Target? And then Chris came along, and I'll let Chris kind of give you his background because it's really a core component to kind of the success of the project at Target.
Yeah, Joe. So longtime retailer. So I think that's what differentiates Ann and ourselves too, is that, we both have retail experience and we're commenting on headlines, that we're seeing in the media every day. And I started my career at the Gap in San Francisco in the late 90s, believe it or not. And then came to work at Target after business school, graduated from Harvard Business School, came to work for Target, and started as a merchant, traditional bricks and mortar store side merchant. Then I actually went out into the field in Colorado around 2011 and learned how to run stores. So I did the really weird thing of being a headquarters executive and then going out into the field to learn how to run retail from the ground up, which was the best decision I ever made. And then ended up coming back to Target and being named the vice president of home furnishings for Target.com. So right then and there, I got a kind of unique experience of having store operations, traditional bricks and mortar merchandising, as well as e-commerce experience. And And then ultimately I was Target's first omnichannel merchant too. So I actually piloted a joint P&L structure for digital and stores at the same time. I was the first person at the company to do that. And yeah, and then I met Ann on the Store of the Future project, which like Ann said was, how do you conceive of the Target brand 5 to 10 years from now? And why are people still coming to physical stores to shop?
So thank you for kind of giving the overview of both Omni Talk Retail as well as a little bit about your individual careers. It is a nice mix of experience that you had, and it seems like that the two of you kind of come from different perspectives, which I think makes for an interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk. We kind of reviewed a little bit about the origin of Omni Talk Retail. Tell us a little bit about the mission for the business today and how that might be either the same, or maybe it hasn't really evolved, or if it has changed over the years. Um, Tell us what your kind of North Star is today for the business.
Yeah, I mean, our mission or our muse is really the retail executive, and it's to provide educational content around the things that they need to think about to do their job, and that's who we're targeting every day. And we're trying to do it from the perspective of like we mentioned before, of real retail operators that have been in the business, and between Ann and myself, have covered a lot of the different aspects of retail. So you asked like where did it start and where has it evolved? I mean, Ann mentioned it. It started with an article comparing Amazon to the Vietnam War. Then we started doing podcasts in my basement one evening in March of 2018. And now it's grown into a full-fledged media company. At this point, we have a legitimate podcast network. We have 4 different podcasts that we do on a regular basis, one of which is in the top 100 business podcasts. That's the Omni Talk Retail Fast 5. And then our other 3 shows that we do are also frequently in the top 50 when you search retail on Apple Podcasts as well. So that's where we're going. We don't know where we're going to slow down, Joe. Who knows? Maybe at some point we'll be working with you, or you'll be working for us. Who knows, Joe? We'll see where things go.
Yeah, that sounds exciting, and we actually are going to be working with Ann for the Total Retail Tech event. Actually,
Yes.
it's a perfect segue into my next question in terms of um, what you're seeing. Obviously, you're having conversations with retail executives on a daily basis for the different podcasts that you're producing and the other forms of content that you're putting out there. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and hearing most from a retail technology perspective. Where do you see retailers investing? What are you hearing from retailers in terms of that next big thing that they need to be investing in?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been traveling a lot. The first part of this year, we were traveling internationally to talk to retailers about where their focus was and where they were making investments. And I think the biggest theme that we're hearing, from my perspective at least, is that Gen AI is now, has to be a focus. It has to be something that retailers are looking at to help bolster their business. But it's not in the ways that I think we heard about when it first kind of came onto the scene back in November. I think it's really focused now on operations. How do you leverage Gen AI and AI more broadly to really help get the organizational elements of your business in order? How do you use it to help collect better data and then use it again to analyze that data so that your teams can be making more efficient decisions, that operations can get stronger, really, because you need that in order to invest in any of the other new technology that we're hearing about, the flashier, sexier technology that makes the headlines more frequently. So that for me, I think is probably the biggest one, is how do we use this super powerful tool to really help improve business overall.
And to your point, Anna, maybe you, Chris, have thoughts on this. It's, improving that data collection management process, that foundation then enables you to use that technology across so many different applications within the business. So you think about inventory, you think about supply, all the way upstream to marketing, to merchandising, to customer support. So it's really getting that foundation of data correct, accurate, and then that enables you to do so much more with the Gen AI technology.
Yeah, that's right, Joe. I mean, 100%. You have to have your house in order to get the full bang for the buck on the technology, which I think is one of the things that most retailers are struggling with. They're not struggling with, is probably not the right word, but they're trying to figure out, is like, okay, how do I get started? Where do I start? And where is it going to have the biggest bang for the buck? We also like to talk on our show, like, it feels very similar to, what e-commerce probably felt like back in the mid to late 90s. Like, and I were joking, we were at a conference recently, and like one of the session headlines was like, what is AI and how do you use it? Which if you go back to the conference, schedule back in 1995, that was probably the same type of thing that, people were immersing themselves with inside of in terms of content. And so, we're at mile like 0.25 of this AI marathon at the end of the day.
I'm gonna ask you each to kind of put on your forecaster's hat. We talk about Gen AI, and obviously that's continual process in terms of there's different levels of maturity within different retail organizations on how they're using that technology. But in addition to that, is there other things that you're forecasting for the retail technology market in 2025, particularly? What changes might we see be coming down the pike?
Yeah, I think for 2025 particularly, I mean, I think at the other important note here is that the retail executives are still very focused on seeing the money and seeing the return on investment, particularly. Like no one's going to spend money if they don't see that return on the technology investment. And particularly where they're needing to make their investments work harder is in the store operation itself, particularly at the mass market and the grocery, within the mass market and the grocery verticals too. So my prediction would be in 2025, you're going to see it could be the year of either one of these, if not both. I think it's going to be the year of the electronic shelf label. You've already seen Walmart go to announce they're going to deploy electronic shelf labels over in half their chain, roughly. Hy-Vee just made a similar announcement recently. So that's going to explode. You got Walmart doing it. A lot of people are going to follow suit. And the other one I would say too, which is kind of more under the radar screen, but I think it's going to pop a little bit, is the in-store robot. I really do think when you combine the in-store robotics and the benefits you get across that, especially when you have electronic shelf labels in your store too, the 2025 could be the year of the robot in store as well.
So back to kind of that theme around operations, and you were talking about that. Those both seem to be very operational focused. Efficiency may not be the sexy headline grabbing technologies, the facial recognition or some of the other things that you think about that are more flashy, but really enable you to run more efficient operations within your stores, particularly with those robots and then electronic shelf labels. And Chris, you cited a couple examples of major retailers rolling out those solutions. I want to get back to kind of, you mentioned you've attended a lot of different industry events. It's a big part of what you're doing. It keeps your kind of your ear to the ground and you're following what's happening. As you attend these events, are there common themes? And it could be technology related, it might not be technology, it could be people, culture. Are there common themes that you're hearing across different events that you're like, oh, well, they just heard it. I just was, at NRF when there was a big thing about this, or, and then we went to E-Tail and then we go to Shop Talk and, what are those common themes that you're hearing, at least for the first half of the year across, and it could be related to consumer behavior too, just kind of some of those external factors.
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered, AI and Gen AI specifically, but then I think it's really diving deeper into what Chris was just talking about, this whole idea of the digitization of the physical store, whether that's, things like electronic shelf labels or in-store robotics, or, I think looking at more RFID enablement, what's happening as especially in specialty apparel, what's happening and what can you supercharge? How do you as the retailer kind of have this view of your customer walking the floor in store, taking things into the fitting room, sending them back out? How do you get that picture of the customer that you used to only have when they were shopping online? And how do you bring that into a physical store? I interviewed the head of stores for H&M, and we just are putting out a video on their new flagship shortly, but they're really utilizing RFID to the full extent here to make this experience unlike any other H&M store that you've been in. So I think, really focusing on how you digitize your store, how you create that smart store. But then in the back side of it too, I'd say the other things are just people. One, how are you managing labor shortages? How are you investing in resources and technology to make onboarding and training of associates even faster? And then, how are you handling this new work environment, whether that's at the headquarters or that's, gig economy or gig workers in the store? So I think there's a lot of around people and labor and dealing with that practice. And then I think we're going to hear a lot more the second half of this year and into 2025 on shrink. I think, that for as big a deal as it was becoming in the headlines, as much as we were hearing from retail executives, especially toward the end of 2023, I think we're just starting to hear that pop up in the conference circuit. And I think that will become even more important as retailers are testing both technology solutions and then just good old like gating the entrances and exits of stores to try to figure out how to tackle this issue.
So I want to talk a little bit about, we've talked a lot about the retail organizations themselves. We haven't gotten as much into the consumer and kind of what their mindset is. End of year, I'm asking you again to do a little forecasting, but based on what we've seen to this point of the year, what are you seeing from the consumer? Obviously, it's kind of a volatile situation with the
Yeah.
consumer. So tell me a little bit about what we throw in the fact that we're in an election year, which always
Yeah.
causes a little bit of volatility in the markets too. What are you forecasting Q4? Obviously, critical holiday shopping season for the retailer industry. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's there's a lot of things that could happen between now and the holiday season, Joe. And in a lot of ways, predictions are the most basis form of journalism too. So we try to stay away from it as much as we can. But I think the overall highlights. I think the consumer's still been cautious. I think that's evidenced by the fact that Walmart is seeing significant pickup in the high income shopper as well, pulling from the traditional strongholds like a Target and getting their shopper to come into a Walmart. So I think we're going to see more of the same. The interesting thing is like the June numbers, right around the time we're recording this, were fairly strong, from a consumer sentiment, a consumer spending standpoint. So, people have been pulling back, they've been cautious, but they're still holding strong. So depending on who gets in office or what crazy stuff still happens between now and then, both in the US or in the world too. I mean, it's just so hard to predict. So I think, net, I think you're still going to see the consumer be cautious and go to the retailers, particularly that they think, hold the biggest bang for their buck, right? Like, so Walmart's done great with Walmart Plus, Amazon's still out there with Prime, DoorDash has got their Dash Pass that's very strong. And retailers are going to need to figure out how to continue to augment those types of programs to make their hold with their shoppers that much stickier. And I think you've started to see that come into the mind of the average retail executive more so in the past year. And the retailers that have figured out the punchline of that joke are the ones that are going to succeed.
Yeah, and just to follow up there in terms of, it seems like some of those value changes that you mentioned, Walmart being a great example of kind of the uptick in market share that they've gained, but also some of the off-price chains. You think about Marshalls, TJX,
Yeah.
being an example there. The other side of the coin is kind of those specialty apparel, a lot of mall-based
Yep.
retailers. The real challenges, and those challenges continue. Do you see any flip in that in terms of what we're seeing, even looking into further off into 2025?
Not really. I think it's going to come down to, when you look, I mean, the people that are doing it right are going to continue to excel, and the people that are struggling are probably going to continue to struggle. It's going to be tough to turn the ship around in this environment because you're not going to get any tailwind at your back. And so, for that reason, I think you're going to see the winners from the first half of the year continue to be the winners in the second half of the year and into 2025.
Yeah, and actually, let's jump into some of those winners in terms of what you're seeing for first half of 2024. Are there certain examples of companies that you're kind of putting in that winner category? Maybe conversely, others that might be in that loser category, and then maybe a word or two on why you believe either they're excelling or why they're kind of falling back.
Yeah, I think the first one that we have to recognize for a multitude of reasons is Walmart. I mean, Walmart has just killed it again this year across the board. I mean, you're looking at investments in technology in store to improve overall operations and the shopping experience. You're looking at the success of their retail media
Yeah.
network. They just came out recently that, they're far, far surpassing Target, who's the next in line. I think 11 billion
almost double.
impressions from Walmart's organization this year. And then you look at some of the other investments that they're making, like, the Vizio partnership. There's other things. I think Walmart can only go up from here. And so Walmart, without a doubt, I would say is number one in, really continuing to push the envelope and innovate this year. The other one that I have to mention, because I'm a huge fan of this brand and kind of coming back to it after 25 years, we'll say, being generous, maybe 25 plus is more appropriate, Joe, but it's Abercrombie. I think that, I mean, I think you have an incredible leadership team there. They're making the right investments in really kind of changing the whole concept of the store and what it used to be. We saw, the similar thing happening at Victoria's Secret, but definitely not yet at the level of success that Abercrombie's seen. And I think, ultimately here, we have this missing middle that I think is really important to address that the mall brands once served. And it seems like now we've skewed, lower market. So you're looking at the Sheins, you're looking at Temu, you're looking at, fast fashion players like Zara and H&M, or you're at the luxury end of the spectrum. And I would include even like Lululemon and some of the athleisure brands in that category too. There's no one in the middle that's really serving the place for the average American that the mall brands once were. And so I think Abercrombie is doing a tremendous job of filling that gap. So those are two that I would especially call out.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point around Abercrombie. I was going to mention them, and they kind of are the exception, right? So I cited that that specialty apparel mall-based retailer has really been challenged, but Abercrombie is showing it's not a hopeless cause. You focus on the right mission, you digitize the store, you attract, obviously merchandise plays a role in that as well. But they're really doing a nice things, and you called out the leadership group there as a winner in the first half of the year. Are there any others, Chris or Ann, that you would maybe put on? I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but if there are others that you would say, or at least maybe we could
room for improvement, Joe. Is that where you're going?
Exactly. Areas for improvement, maybe without calling out specific brands, or if you want to call out specific brands, go there.
We tend to be bold at Omni Talk Retail, Joe, so we're not afraid of that.
But I love it. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few that I would say need improvement. I mean, number one, honestly, is where we cut our teeth, which is Target. I think Target is definitively struggling. I think 4 quarters of negative comps. And mentioned Walmart. I mean, Walmart has so many bullets in the chamber when it comes to growth strategies. When you think about Walmart Commerce Technologies, Walmart Go Local, Walmart Retail Media, Walmart's Marketplace, like Target doesn't have any of that. They don't have any of that lined up and ready to go, and it's starting to show. So I think that's going to continue to be a big question in terms of where do they go going forward. The other two I'd mention, Kohl's for sure. Kohl's is fascinating to me because Sephora is potentially doing well. You've got Ulta in their earnings call actually coming out and saying like Sephora at Kohl's is hurting our business, but yet Kohl's can't capitalize on that fact, which is just mind-blowing, which shows, to Ann's point, too, that department stores are just in general still a tough value proposition for the average consumer anymore. And the other one I'd bring in too is Nike. Nike seems like it's starting to show some signs of weakness here, which is kind of surprising coming out of the pandemic. You would have thought between their shift to DTC strategy, they're kind of moving away from wholesale, trying to rebalance that. You'd have thought they'd figured that out, but given some recent executive changes, it feels like maybe they haven't. And they could be in for some struggles there too. So those are the three I would single out or ask or, give them the NI on their report card of needs improvement. I won't give them a letter grade, Joe, but I'd give them the NI.
Yeah, and I certainly agree. And there's some interesting call outs there. So I do want to thank Ann Mezzenga as well as Chris Walton, the co-CEOs for Omni Talk Retail, for joining us on this episode of Total Retail Talks. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, Ann, and thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please check out our podcast channel page at mytotalretail.com/podcasts for show notes. Total Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Total Retail Talks.